As countless people shout at their screens, smear paint on their faces, and get their hearts broken because 11 strangers couldn't win a game, there's a huge portion of the population that feels nothing at all, and neuroscience suggests their brains might be the reason why. Just hang on for a second, because what I'm about to share is going to fundamentally alter the way you look at every sports fanatic you know. Let's get one thing straight that no one ever says. Not being into sports doesn't make you uninteresting. It's not a sign that you don't have passion, and it most certainly does not mean you're broken in some way. However, something remarkable is happening inside your head that's totally different from the 60% of Americans who treat sports like a religion. We should probably tackle the biggest question first. Why does this matter so much to so many people? At our core, humans are tribal. For millennia, belonging to a group was the key to staying alive. Your tribe gave you protection from predators, helped you find food, and ultimately ensured your survival. Sports are just the modern version of those tribes, except with way better merchandise. When a fan watches their team, their brain gets a flood of oxytocin, which is the hormone for bonding. It's the very same chemical that deepens your love for your family. That's insane, right? Their mind is literally fooling them into feeling like these multi-millionaire athletes are their own kin. But this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Individuals who don't get wrapped up in sports tend to have what psychologists label as weaker tribal instincts. Their sense of self isn't as deeply connected to being part of a larger collective. They lean more toward individualism. They're the ones who think, my identity feels whole without needing to be part of something bigger. And this isn't just a theory, it's backed by actual science. A study from 2019 revealed that subjects with low interest in sports demonstrated significantly less us versus them thinking. In other words, they don't develop an automatic dislike for the opposing team simply because they're on the other side. But hold on, it gets even stranger. Because what goes on in a sports fan's brain during a match is genuinely a bit alarming. Think about that moment right before you tear open a gift, that buzz of anticipation. That's a dopamine rush in your brain. Sports lovers get that exact same chemical reward throughout the entire game, with every single play in possession. It's a constant drip of tiny rewards. This process is, by its very nature, addictive. Brain scans using fMRI technology reveal that watching your team play lights up the same reward pathways as gambling and other powerfully addictive behaviors. And here's the real secret sauce. It's the not knowing what will happen that makes it so potent. You have no idea if your team is going to pull it off. That sheer unpredictability is what keeps the dopamine pump primed. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, and it's the most powerful reward schedule ever discovered. It's the exact same principle that makes slot machines impossible to walk away from. The whole process is disturbingly similar to other behavioral addictions. To your brain, a dopamine hit is a dopamine hit. It doesn't really care where it comes from. It just craves another dose. For people who are indifferent to sports, their dopamine circuits simply don't fire up from watching others compete. This could very well be written in their genes. Research coming out of the University of Chicago points to the idea that differences in our dopamine receptor genes can actually predict how invested someone will be in competitive events. Just let that sink in. The fact that you couldn't care less if the Lakers win or lose could genuinely be encoded in your DNA. But it goes even deeper. Sports fans get to engage in something known as basking in reflected glory, or burging. You'll hear fans say, "We won," after a victory, but if the team loses, suddenly it's "they lost." Did you catch that change in pronouns? It's a psychological trick that people who aren't into sports tend to avoid. Their sense of self is a lot more stable. They don't rely on wins from the outside to feel good about themselves. This means their self-worth is steadier, not riding on outcomes they have absolutely no control over. Okay, before everyone rushes to the comments, let me be clear. I'm not saying either approach is superior. What I am saying is that there are very real psychological divides here, and it's fascinating to explore what they are. Now, here's an idea that might seem like a contradiction at first. Sports enthusiasts frequently test higher in some areas of empathy. They get a lot of practice caring intensely about the trials of others, even when those others are strangers who just happen to wear the same team colors. So what gives? Why don't people who skip the game share that same feeling for the players? It boils down to how we distribute our emotional energy. Everyone only has so much emotional energy to go around. People who aren't sports fans simply invest that emotional energy elsewhere, into things like social justice, their own relationships, artistic endeavors, or even intellectual puzzles. A study from 2021 revealed that individuals with little interest in sports scored significantly higher for openness and appreciation for art and beauty. They're finding that emotional thrill in paintings, songs, nature, or big ideas. Their minds are chasing the very same things, a sense of purpose, community, and something bigger than themselves. They're just looking for it somewhere else. And we should be honest about one more thing. For some people, not following sports is a protective measure. Maybe they were picked on during PE. Maybe they felt like outsiders in that world. Maybe they rejected the hyper-aggressive culture that can come with being a superfan. Or maybe they simply never understood why adults yell at a television over a game. Your lack of interest could have deep roots, or you could simply be bored by it. Both reasons are perfectly fine. But this next part really explains why fans and non-fans often talk past each other. It's all about where you find meaning. For the sports fan, meaning lives in the story, the underdog narrative, the incredible comeback, the rise of a dynasty, the bitter rivalry. It's unscripted drama where the stakes feel incredibly real. On the other hand, people who don't follow sports often see that randomness as pointless. Their thinking goes like this: why should I get emotionally attached to a result I can't influence, carried out by strangers in a contest that has zero impact on my life? And honestly, they have a point. But so do the fans. These are simply two different ways humans satisfy the universal craving for narrative and purpose. One person finds their story in a championship run. Another finds it in a book, a relationship, a creative project, or a scientific breakthrough. Researchers call this parasocial investment versus direct engagement. Fans build powerful one-way emotional bonds with teams and athletes. Non-fans tend to invest their emotional energy in areas where their actions actually affect the outcome, places where they are participants, not spectators. Neither approach is better, they're just different paths through life. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who studied the concept of optimal experience, discovered that the mental state of flow, that feeling of being completely absorbed in something, can be triggered by many different activities. For some people, it's watching a game. For others, it's found somewhere entirely different. And this is where it gets really interesting. People who aren't invested in sports often report feeling more engaged in their own lives. They're not spending 3 hours every Sunday watching someone else's victory or defeat. They're focused on their own journey. And there's something powerful about that. So what's the takeaway? If sports don't interest you at all, it doesn't mean you're missing something essential about being human. It simply means your brain is wired differently. The way you process rewards, your instinct for belonging, and where you place your empathy are just tuned to a different frequency. And that's completely okay. The next time someone asks, "Did you watch the game?" and you honestly couldn't care less, remember this: you're not boring. You're just playing a completely different game. And maybe, just maybe, it's the one that actually matters most to you. If any of this resonated with you, you'll probably be fascinated by how introverts experience the world differently and why that might be one of your greatest strengths. Tap on one of these videos to explore what makes your perspective stand apart from the rest.